If I could start with Donna Sims Wilson, who is president of Smith Graham and Company Investment Advisors. My question for you, Donna, is as a mentor to women and investment leaders participating in and benefiting from the emerging investment manager programs in the U.S., how could this initiative assist development and empower female investment managers in Africa? And what would your wise advice be to regulators to support such an empowerment framework for up-and-coming female finance managers? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Barbara, and thank you to African Investor for asking me to be here to speak to you all today. As she said, my name is Donna Sims Wilson, and I'm president of Smith Graham. We are a $6 billion African-American-owned investment management firm headquartered in Houston with a big office here in New York. And I have been on Wall Street for over 30 years now, starting, of course, when I has to be now about 8 years old. That's the only way that the math works at this point. My firm and other firms that have been owned by minorities and women have benefited for something here in the United States called emerging manager programs. So there are public pension plans, there are corporate pension plans, there are union pension plans that all have these programs that basically have a separate category for minorities and women by asset class to manage the assets of those plans. So let's say, for example, the New York State Common Retirement Fund, which is a $160 billion plan. They have over $10 billion now being managed by firms that are owned by minorities and women. And they went about that very intentionally. So to just back up for a second and talk about the evolution of these plans, in the public plan space, if you just look at the demographics of who work for governments, you know, the teachers, the policemen, the firemen, government workers in general, the demographics tend to be minorities and women. And so as a result of that, minority and women members, employee members of these pension plans ascended to the pension boards and then ascended even to positions of power on the pension boards and said, we want people who look like us, women and minorities, to manage our assets. And for those of you who are brokers in the room, to trade the securities that go along with the management of our assets. And so that's how emerging manager programs grew. Now they are, you know, at least 80 public plans from the New York State Common Retirement Fund, New York City plans, in Connecticut, New Jersey, Illinois, North Carolina, Texas, California, Los Angeles City, Los Angeles County. All of these pension plans now have emerging manager programs where women and minorities manage billions and billions of assets. Now, these programs, let me be clear, were fueled by results. All of these assets are managed to an index, and either you perform well versus that index or you don't. And there have been many studies written to show that smaller firms and firms owned by minorities and women actually perform better in certain asset classes than their larger counterparts. And this is not a knock at all on some of the larger firms that I'm sure are here in the audience, but it's just a point of fact. And so these programs have grown as a result of the good performance of these plans. And so my advice, to sum up very quickly, my advice is that there are the allocators of assets in Africa, the pension funds in Africa, the sovereign wealth funds in Africa, the Social Security funds in Africa should specifically seek out women-owned investment managers. They should require that the consultants that they work with have databases of women-owned investment managers. And those managers should be solicited to apply to manage the assets. They should also have events where the allocators of capital and women-owned managers can meet and have something that we call here in the United States speed dating. there are many kind of emerging manager conferences that happen where the staff people who are responsible for allocating capital get to meet minority and women-owned managers, and as a result, they get to know them, because I think it's a universal fact that people do business with people that they know and like. And so it's very important that the allocators of capital know women managers.
Donna, I thank you. There's two headlines, I think, in the comments that you've made that resonate. One is performance indexes, and I wonder if that wouldn't be part of your suggestion, that to show that there's a tangible benchmark, and so that there's the fiduciary process of ensuring. As well, the ability to be able to have a database so you actually know who's out there. And we know we have a general, in the last session, we talked about the lack of capacity building. Part of that is also not knowing who's out there, not just risk mitigation instruments, but also the experts to be able to help you. So can you hold on a second? So we're very happy to have our chair just arrive. So I don't have to step in anymore. This is Mati Marupin, Commissioner for Economic Affairs at the African Union Commission. Ken, would you like to take over?
Maybe I can succeed but not take over. Okay. Usually take over is...
Oh, you see, he's been around a lot of strong women. He's very careful.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to be in the company of these lovely ladies. I come from the African Union. The chairperson ought to have been here herself, but we are so torn apart and so much to do. In fact, this morning also, I had to open another event before I came here, and it's a little bit distance. They are far apart. So we have to be circus people also. It's not enough to be the commissioner for economic, but you must also be a circus person and juggle. You know how to throw 20 balls or eggs in the air without breaking them. I would really thank Africa Invest very much for organizing this event, and to say that African Union, we were so happy that this session, UNGA 70, is going to adopt formally Sustainable Development Goals or post-2015 development agenda, because we contributed tremendously. Africa was the only region of the world that contributed towards the work of the open working group with well-articulated, comprehensive contribution in the form of what we call CAP, African Common Position on post-2015 development agenda. And SDGs, the 17 goals, reflect very much what is in that CAP, the Green Book, which Africa contributed to development in the world. Meantime, we have our own, we have a vessel or a vehicle that is ready to take these sustainable development goals forward on the African continent, and that is Agenda 2063, which is based again on the contribution of stakeholders, a wide spectrum of stakeholders. It has about 20 goals, so we see SDGs as a subset of Agenda 2063. The whole objective, you know, everybody is praising Africa. Africa, you know, a decade ago it was 2%, then it became 4%, now it's 5%, is the highest average. But we are not flattered by this, because we know that to transform Africa from where it is now, we need about 7% growth plus, you know, either 7% or higher in real terms to really make the difference. Now we come to how are we going to go about that? By transforming the economy. We would like to go into infrastructure development, infrastructure in this case in its broadest context. You know, physical infrastructure, soft infrastructure, including communications and others, but also transforming agriculture, accelerating industrialization, particularly manufacturing. UNIDO still says manufacturing is still the greatest generator of employment. Then we go into developmental services to make sure that the services are there. Integration will be is being accelerated, in fact, already with the tripartite agreement between COMESA, SADC, and East African Community. We are moving towards continental free trade area. So we have to improve productive capacities. We have to enhance our competitiveness so that we can join international supply chains. And for that, we will need investment. Now, Africa, we said, is open for business. We are really ready for investors. I remember being in Sweden at one time when I was still in Geneva as an ambassador there. I was chairing a committee which was going to raise funds for what we call Enhanced Integrated Framework for the least developed countries. And because I was the chair of the board, my minister was there. The two ministers were there addressing the press conference. And one of the journalists said, you know, here in Scandinavia, we are very happy, we're in Stockholm. And we were successful. We raised about 108 million that day, but eventually it was 225. For least developed countries, that made the difference. We said, you know, we are not happy with what China is doing in Africa. And the Swedish minister said, no, to my minister, don't answer that question, I will answer it. And I will answer it with another question. Let me ask you, who stopped Scandinavian and European and OECD investment from going to Africa? If you think the Chinese are having such a good time in Africa, why don't you also go and have that good time? And indeed, that's the question we are asking. Who is preventing investors from going to Africa? Because we are saying we are open for business. Investors are invited. And a lot of investors find that the atmosphere, the competitiveness has reached a point that really the rate of returns are very high and is the growth point in the world today. Now that brings us to women. You know that this is African Union's year of empowerment, women empowerment. And I'm coordinating that within the, you may be surprised, a man coordinating women empowerment, but we are doing it, and we want to show results at the end of this year. Not just talk. Talk is enough. We want tangible results, really. It's time to move on. And I have to tell you that is for very selfish reasons. Is to make sure that we make use of all human resources and all talents that the continent can marshal, which are at the disposal. So you cannot exclude more than 50% of the population and say you are using your resources. We think our women are talented. We think that they have a lot of energy, and we would like to engage them. But some of the statistics which my chairperson likes to quote is that they found that when women earn income, women on average use 70% of their income on the family, compared to 30% men. Men only use 30% of their income on the family, on average. So for socio-economic development, it's good to invest in women, to invest in and with women. So women economic engagement is very important, and we would like investors to really take women along. Look at Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, which works among women. No collateral needed, but default rate is minimal. It has been very successful, so women are also dependable. So investing in women is very gainful. So I want to be clear that it's for selfish reasons. It's not because we like women, but I love women.
If we could.
But yeah, I'm concluding. Actually, that's what I'm rounding up. Actually, no, it's because it's practical. If what we want is that 7% plus in real terms of growth, then we have to engage women. Thank you very much.
Oh, well, that
And
is
that's the
terrific. Let's
position.
say hooray for women in Africa. And before you came, our advisor here, Donna, had shared with us some of the best practices in her firm managing $6 billion of funds of using benchmarks that show that women managers really perform, in fact, in many cases outperform the male managed firms, as well as the importance of having databases on female managers. And so this, when you talk about the AU pursuing concrete steps, what we're trying to do here is to brainstorm, as you know, ahead of the AU Presidential Summit in January 2016. So I'm wondering if we progress to our next panelist, and if she can share with us some ideas as we try and brainstorm how we can have the precise steps that the AU can follow. And I'm going to ask Saidi Nash Carter, Head of Innovation Africa for Thomson Reuters and co-chair of the Black Employee Network. So, Saidi, can you tell us about your work with the Black Employee Network and how you feel that sustainable development goals can be leveraged by the African Union as an opportunity to empower women through entrepreneurship and finance in Africa?
Sure. So again, thank you for having me this morning. I'm really happy to sort of talk about this topic. It's one that I am quite passionate about. So I'll start with our work, or my work in particular, with the Black Employee Network at Thomson Reuters. It is a professional affinity group. It is a global organization with 11 chapters that span the U.S., including New York, Atlanta, Washington, D.C., Eagan, Minnesota, Carrollton, Texas, and also we have chapters in London and Nairobi. I am global co-chair of that organization, and we really have 3 areas of focus for our sort of work. The first one is around recruitment, so attracting the best Black talent to Thomson Reuters. The second one is around development. So once that talent is inside of the organization, how do we make sure that we are developing them to reach their full potential within the organization? Thirdly, it's around advancement, right? So making sure that the talent is flowing through the organization and moving into the opportunities that they're best placed or best fit to deliver on. It's very much a partnership with our corporate social responsibility and inclusion group, which sits within our human resources department. And we really are focused on becoming an employer of choice for people of color across the board, and importantly, unlocking the full potential of our employees inside of the organization, because as a part of this effort, we really want them to feel like they can bring their whole selves to work. And a part of that too, which I think is really important and related to what we're talking about here, is connecting with the diaspora inside of Thomson Reuters. We're able to think about ways we can flow talent from the Americas, for example, or from Europe to Africa, right? And what that flow looks like, and how you can and we can exchange ideas, talent, expertise to grow our business across the different continents. So that's sort of the Black Employee Network and how we focus there. It's talking about sort of women's empowerment and technology and entrepreneurism, et cetera. I really want to, given the role that I have, which is focused on innovation and thinking differently about how we do business in these markets, I want to emphasize the importance of leveraging emerging technology and the startup ecosystem in the development of all of that. Particularly when we think about sub-Saharan Africa and the role that mobile technology plays. Certainly here in the US, mobile technology is pretty core to everything that we do, but it's much more of a mobile-first environment. In sub-Saharan Africa, what we find as we're beginning to look at sort of products and services there, it really is a mobile-only environment. And so that is sort of a cornerstone of how we're thinking about our products and services there, also financial technology and how that is evolving. And we're working very closely with a number of different organizations to make sure that as we think about this startup and entrepreneur engagement, that we are tapping into female talent, female entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs of color and otherwise that are also tackling some of these challenges. I think it's super important that women have a voice at the table when it comes to the development of technology. Some of the most or the best collaborators and communicators that I know are women. Technology is a important enabler of that. So making sure that these women are thinking about the next generation of collaboration and communication, I think is very important to sustain development of real technology that can have an impact not only on how we communicate and connect with each other, but also how our societies develop and advance and grow positively going forward. To the gentleman's point around women sort of innately thinking about community and family in pretty much everything that we do. I think technology has a role to play in solving for social ills, and women are well placed to help to solve for some of those things.
I thank you. I find those comments very stimulating because when around financing for development in the SDGs, as you know, we talk a lot about capacity building. And if we want to do infrastructure in Africa, we need to have the capacity in Africa to identify, develop, and finance those projects. So the kinds of strategies that you were talking about, you know, for example, in developing the local finance initiative for Tanzania and Uganda, we had a real issue recruiting the local talent that could really build that program. And so for the AU, and thinking through how do you actually go through a process of recruitment and bring in women as well, I think some of your examples and the kind of principles are quite applicable. Now we'll move on, thank you, to our last speaker, to Lena Sen, who's Executive Director of the CGF Bourse. And my question for you, Lena, is using yourself as an example, can you help us with another more personal view about how women can be better empowered to participate in the development of finance that we need so much to move ahead?
Sure. Thank you so much for this opportunity. An opportunity to share maybe what I perceive as an improbable story. Growing up in Senegal, in West Africa, coming to the US to go to college in Maine, of all places, after Senegal. It was quite a transition right there. Then from college, going straight to Wall Street here in New York, JP Morgan, Lehman, then moving on to graduate school, Harvard Business School, Kennedy School, White House Fellowship, back to Wall Street, and then deciding that it was time for me to go back home to Senegal, which I did a couple years ago, and to continue my career in finance. And I call that an improbable journey because there was nothing that I would have anticipated while I was in high school in Senegal that could have given me those opportunities, except for what we call empowering women and young girls. And in my case, that empowerment really came from three sources. First source was encouragement and mentoring from fellow women leaders like Donna Sims right here. Actually, ironically, we haven't seen each other in a very, very long time, but she was one of my biggest role models on Wall Street. She took me under her wing. She didn't have to. I was a little analyst at JP Morgan. And so those were personal acts that people can take that can actually go a long way. So in addition to mentoring that individuals can do, and that goes both for women and men who are in finance, you'd be surprised by how just taking, a little portion of your time, once a month, to sit down and have a conversation with a young girl or a young woman who's in the harsh environment of finance and Wall Street, how that can go a long way in her career and her impact in the world of finance. The other thing that helped was, which I think we should do a lot more if we're talking about getting more women in finance in Africa, it's actually internship programs, which actually are great, a wonderful tool that actually is quite common in the US, but when you look at Africa, there are very few formal programs that exist that actually recruit talented young women to bring them and expose them to different areas within finance. So that's something that I think that should be encouraged, and that's where I believe the AU can play a role in terms of encouraging banks that are on the continent to establish formal programs to recruit young women. They could be on the continent, they could be studying at a university in other countries, but recruit them to come back to the continent and expose them to the world of finance. And also the media, I think, can play a role. The media, I don't see enough role models that are showcased or given as examples to follow. I don't see it enough in the US, and for sure I don't see it enough on the continent since I've been back. And I think people like Donna, they can actually inspire so many people, not just women, but young men as well, to go on, to go and do careers in finance that can take them to lead organizations that manage $6 billion. So that's my personal input in that, empowering young women and girls.
Well, I think it is so right on mark, because here we are, convergence. We have to implement. We can't implement without capacity. So your story and the fact that two of you are reunited in this panel that just sort of is just really true. But this is the model, not just for women, but for everyone in getting finance. The AU has a leadership role, very important in mobilizing the political commitment of heads of state in Africa, but how to be able to actually create the talent that's needed to fill Africa Agenda 2063 starting yesterday. Do you want to make any comments in response to your female advisors?
No, I'm really very impressed by the testimony I've had here. This is what we are hoping for. This is what we think should be happening. And I like it when you say yesterday, because we ought to have started way back. So programs such as this, are the, down to earth, how to do it, how to do it. Because we have been talking about these things, but I really feel, and we feel at African Union, that there's been enough talk. What we have to do now is delivery. We should show progress. So I'm impressed by what I have heard here about how to go about really engaging women in economic activities, particularly in finance. I think my fellow panelists here are mainly from finance, but also in other spheres of entrepreneurship. So I can only cheer and hope that can permeate throughout the continent. And I want to say, when we say 2015 is the year of empowerment, it doesn't mean that come December 31st, it's fireworks and we say it's behind us. No, it's the launching year. It means from 2015 onwards, until we achieve the objectives, women empowerment it's on. In fact, we ought to accelerate as time goes. Thank you, moderator.
But if I could try and tie just a global point from our first session to this one. Internships, university courses. We talked about, in Addis Ababa, action agenda, that, and, very riveting, blended finance. But how do you do it? What are the models? Who does what? How many African universities have finance courses in project finance? We couldn't, as the business steering committee for FFD, we tried to get the concept of project finance into that document. It did not happen. But yet, that is the fundamental financial principle for unlocking capital for energy, water, sanitation, and the like. So that would be something, with your permission, we would love to suggest be on the presidential summit in January 2016. Are you interested in your advisors fleshing out some points for that?
Yeah, I have these advisors and more. Even at the,
You don't want more.
no, these advisors and more. Because those ideas about how to do it, it's really what we would like to hear so that we
great.
move forward.
Well, this is what
Yeah,
this
so
meeting
all
is.
these inputs are welcome.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll move to Q&A. We just, we're a little bit, are there any comments, questions, observations? Yes, please, identify yourself.
Yes, good morning. My name is Ahmed Diomande, and I'm from Cote d'Ivoire's Investment Promotion Agency. I wanted to congratulate all the women there for your testimony, and certainly your example are very eloquent in themselves and give us a lot of hope. This is more a comment than a question. I think since listening to the first panel and here again the second one, we've been talking about partnership, public and the private, in the course of transforming Africa. And I think I share a little bit of the same experience of the previous speaker, sister from Senegal, with my experience in the US and returning recently into Cote d'Ivoire. Here we are talking about how to empower women. And indeed in Africa, you will realize that first it starts with education. None of you would have been up there if we haven't, you haven't been to school. So, that's the first thing for me. In Africa, you still have government. Cote d'Ivoire recently made, this was actually a law where you're required to be sent to school. I mean, that was very amazing for me. I didn't know it wasn't that way before. But the point is, young girls are not going to school. So how do you end up in a panel if you haven't been given the chance or the tool? So, and the second thing is, I think there is, I heard Donna, I believe, I heard her say, how the Common Retirement Fund in New York State, that I contributed to, by the way, was able to set aside some portion of its capital in terms of investment in women-run organization. That is absolutely, that's the key. So how now, for instance, some of the investment that your firms or related companies make in Africa, are there any conditions put on them, requiring them to invest or to partner with government that purposefully set aside or make women's achievement goal as priority? I think that's very, very important, that we have to, at every single corner, to think about Africa differently. It's not the same model that you see here. It will not work. It has to be something that is not only indigenous to Africa, but also it has to be taught from within. Ask Africans themselves. This whole, somebody talked about earlier, it's not the technology, it's a mobile-only environment. That is so true. So anyway, I said it was just a way of comment. I think it's important that this conversation really, you have a wonderful, wonderful opportunity here in the US because of what the Constitution and what the country afforded you with. So now the question is, how do you pay that back forward? Or how do you literally, use that platform and say, okay, government, this is what we do here in the US. We want to empower our sisters in Africa. What can you do?
Sure. Okay, so I have a specific suggestion about what you just said. So it's a great thing to be the client, right? So the African Union is made up of heads of state of all the African countries, and so let's just pick a country. If the president of Senegal says that all of the Senegalese capital pools, so all of the Senegalese public pension plans, the Social Security, National Investment Trust of Senegal, if there's a sovereign wealth fund of Senegal, if all of these institutions exist, they now must require their outside investment managers, as a condition of managing assets, to have an intern. You know, something as simple as that. And because the Social Security National Investment Trust of Senegal has, I don't know, $100 billion in assets, I know it's not that much, but just pick a number, and there are all these money managers all over the world that want to manage those assets, they will know in the RFP, in the request for proposal, that as a condition of you gathering these, getting assets from us, you must hire, you know, for an internship program or whatever it is, you must hire, you must engage with a local Senegalese. If you're the client, you can require that. And if the manager wants to manage the money, then that's what they'll do. And I assure you, they'll be happy to do that. And so that's a way that these programs that exist here can export themselves across the continent. Just a thought.
And if I may just add, I think what that requires is the willingness on the part of the heads of state,
Yes.
to actually believe in this type of initiative and to encourage it and to push it down to the agencies and the pension funds within the country. Without that, I think it will be difficult to even talk about an initiative that the individual organizations or entities will adopt.
And isn't this not any different than, say, for example, the whole BOT, build, operate, transfer, where in order to do this, the company has to hire local employees and they have to learn, and, you know, capacity building is a part of the actual project. It's the same type of concept, but just applied to the world of finance.
And just to build on that idea and to pick up on your point about partnerships, and obviously my focus is very much in the technology and innovation space. There are quite a number of really great organizations that are trying to crack this nut around getting women and people of color more engaged in technology. Digital Undivided, for example, who is run by an amazing woman, Catherine Finney, her sole mission in life is empowering female entrepreneurs of color in the tech space. So there's quite a lot that we can learn from her and take to Africa to do similar things there. And I'm sure there are folks on the ground already doing that as well, but I think that is a great sort of partnership opportunity. There are organizations like Black Girls Code, for example. You talk about how do you train these girls, right, getting them in school and learning. Maybe it's not a traditional school in the way that we've thought about it. Maybe it's a community-based program that teaches them the code. And then they can build their own businesses, right? And they're not employed by anyone but themselves. And so I think that is a real exciting opportunity too, because technology sort of opens up the world and develop in a way that I don't think I've seen before.
On that note, we are running a little bit late. So if there are other people that have comments, I encourage you to speak to the people on the panel. But please join me in thanking everyone. And I think we've really been successful. You asked for specific points. I hope you feel that you have some ammunition to go home with. So thank you. If we could just take 10
Doing business in Africa, you can't afford to be without Africa Investor.